11 years. That's how long it took for the original generation series to start, and oddly, published by Atlus in the United States, it would take the US nearly 4 more years before receiving these games. Yet only a year later would Banpresto remake the games on the PS2, though we sadly never got them. As you can imagine, they contain updated new canonical information, but this is the best I can do unless Bandai Namco releases a HD collection or something. So for now, we begin the first tale of Super Robot Wars. The West doesn't have nearly enough video games about giant robots. Apart from licensing issues when it comes to other games, and sometimes overcomplicated control schemes, the market has always felt barren. Even if an idea does come up, like with Zone of the Enders or Titanfall, it's quickly forgotten about in favor of other games. Or the games can be horrible, like that one Front Mission game I heard about, Left Alive or something like that. At the same time, the stories can be very difficult to approach as well, like with Xenosaga. Super Robot Wars, on the other hand, always felt approachable, barring Moon Dwellers due to all the continuity. One of the reasons though it's so easy to get into is the story. Sure, there are sometimes dealing with multiverse theory, aliens, monsters coming from other dimensions, but never once do I really tilt my head unless I'm missing something from a game. Well, one of the main things it's so easy to follow is because Super Robot Wars always felt like playing a Saturday morning cartoon, or a late night anime on Toonami if you could stay up that long. Thanks to school and always forced to wake up super early, I usually conked out before the show began. If you couldn't tell already by the review of Maso Kaishin, these stories, while having a lot of serious moments, are not exactly deep. Not even close to Xenosaga deep anyway. But they still have interesting and fun characters, so I always feel that was worth looking into. At the very least, we need to look into the first game before reviewing the superior sequel. And now's a good time to get into the series thanks to certain games being translated and available for sale on stuff like PlayAsia and eBay. Super Robot Wars V, X, and T are perfect to get into as they are set in their own universe, barring Mazaki stumbling into X. These games were made for beginners, and I recommend getting the Switch versions of V and X since it's bundled with all the DLC. Not really necessary, but you can get some fun scenarios to toy with. As for this game, let's find out with this review of Super Robot Taisen, Original Generations on the Game Boy Advance. And I'm assuming Taisen is just another word for war, but I don't know why they changed it. I will also be calling this Super Robot Wars anyway because I don't care. I'm gonna assume you watched my review of Maso Kaishin. If not, a brief explanation. The Super Robot Wars series are tactical games kind of in the same vein as Fire Emblem, though with major differences since we're dealing with giant robots capable of insane attacks. Almost everything is the same as Maso Kaishin, but now positioning, which left you vulnerable in some spots, is gone completely, so you just have to worry about the range of some attacks. The presentation may also seem like a downgrade based on this grid. It isn't though, mainly with the animations of the robots doing their thing once the attacks are initiated. The length also usually depends on the attack. And the music, yes, it's hard for me to find a song I hate in Original Generations. Boss themes will override everything though, barring one certain character who does eventually become playable. The standard map music I also kinda got used to over time, though I like it a bit more than in Maso Kaishin. One awful design choice though is the alarm. In the story it will go off when the enemy is close, and it just keeps going. Here's an example. I think I missed the bouncing robots from Mega Man X Command Mission. Never mind, I can at least speed up the process on the GBA. The alarm is not the worst thing in the world, but I hate it regardless. Aside from that, the other sound effects work well enough, and much like Maso Kaishin, you'll have to use your imagination for some scenes, though they have the hindsight to use more than just one simple background. And with the sequel, the presentation won't really change all that much. Although to be fair, that's because they keep squeezing in tons and tons of characters. Speaking of those, the robots and characters are handled much differently. With the exception of certain characters like Maziki and Loon, you can swap out pilots with almost any robot you have. So if you really wanted to, you could focus on non-main characters and have them pilot the stronger machines. In fact, the game even encourages you to swap others around, as their base stats and abilities, along with their spirits, may also reflect what they are good at. For example, someone like Bullet oddly has skills that would benefit him more in close range combat. However, in some stages, certain characters will be unable to be changed or be forced back into their original mechs, which does limit the freedom sometimes. It reaches peak annoying in episodes 32 and 33. See, certain characters are now being interrogated for story purposes, so you can't use the R-series robots. Okay, that's fair enough, but by episode 33 you need to reassign everyone and give them back their weapons. I repeat, the game unequipped all my weapons for one stage and is now forcing me to equip them back on despite me spending so much time preparing them for the battles ahead in other stages. So when the fight started, I had to reset the fight since about a fourth of my team were useless since their arsenal was severely limited. And you wanna know the added crotch kicker? The footage I recorded got corrupted. Again, because this did happen once in Maso Kaishin as well. Why are my favorite games forcing me to try and have some kind of combine harvester moment? Also, unlike with Maso Kaishin, certain units are able to equip different weapons to expand their arsenal. Really, the gear you gain feels more like it's to expand your usable attacks, since rarely they're going to be relied on for finishing off a boss. For example, I gave the Taisen a long-range rifle since it was often targeted due to its limited range. This isn't really a bad thing, and like I said before, not having the extra stuff crippled the R-Series team since their range output was super limited. To get the super good weapons to equip on anyone, like this katana, you need to fulfill certain conditions. And no, there is no store to just buy extra gear. You have repair and supply modules rather than using a dedicated machine. Due to their low cost, they can be equipped by almost anybody. You can only get 2 of each though, so you have to know which units are better off being a medic. And of course, hoping they are tough enough to endure an assault by a foe. There are also weapons that can impair a foe, like lower their defense or accuracy. Some bosses do have defense against those sometimes, so it's best to learn about them ASAP. Those type of attacks don't really do any kind of damage, but the accuracy is awesome. Even the ships can hit the enemy. Usually. And unlike Maso Kaishin, the value of spirits changes, as they may require more or less SP depending on the character. For example, some characters may only need about 10 or 15 points to make use of the strike command, which lets them lock onto a target and counters the afterimage ability. Meanwhile, our good boy Maziki gains the skill later, and it costs 30 SP. I guess since he commonly gets lost in the story, didn't happen in Maso Kaishin. Another example is the skill Excel, which lets a unit move an additional 3 spaces. This usually costs 5 SP, but for someone like Sanger Zonbolt, the rate is doubled. This is something carried over in future Super Robot Wars games. Although skills like Attacker and SP Regenerate will remain exclusive to certain characters beyond Game 2, like in Moon Dwellers, so don't get too attached to those abilities. It's kinda why the skill Mental, which reduces the SP cost, feels so valuable in the future. Speaking of the character skills, you can gain PP to either boost any stats or learning new abilities. Each character will have their own, so it's unnecessary and a waste to buy something they already have. For example, buying Violetta more gunfighting skills is pointless when it will level up alongside her. Each skill has a different benefit, like the ability to move after attacking, which is very handy for long-range units, regenerating your SP to use more spirits, lowering the amount of energy necessary to use certain skills, and far too more to get into. One of the most interesting abilities is called Support. If a unit has at least one of these, they can help an attacking ally next to them by unleashing another attack. Given how enemies have a lot of health later and other challenges like killing a boss unit before they retreat, these are extremely handy. You can even choose the attack you want the unit to use too, which is recommended unless you want to burn through energy super quickly or waste ammo. There is a bit of confusing info regarding supports I have yet to figure out. See, it may not sometimes activate near a unit. This is due to the elevation of the target. For example, a unit in the air may not be able to provide backup to someone on the ground or the sea. Sometimes. I say sometimes since this rule was ignored. It makes more sense in space where every unit is stuck on one plane of existence and all move around the same way. Just something to keep in mind when in a fight and you're wondering what the hell is going on when you need someone to fire off an extra shot. Although the skill is also useless if the unit who has the support skill has already used their turn. They can also provide defense too, like protecting a more fragile unit on an enemy's turn. That said, it's important to know how much damage they can soak up, just so a support attack is not used so wastefully, which I found is very easy to do if you try rushing through a stage. And as you might expect, some enemies have this too, so you have to time your attacks carefully. Almost all mechs are divided into 2 categories: real robots and super robots. The real robots are your smaller mechs. Your Gundam, I mean Huckbein. Yes, totally not a Gundam. Seriously, how the hell did they get away with this? Anyway, the real robots prioritize mobility as opposed to raw power. Sometimes they may hit hard, but they can't take too much of a beating. The Weissritter, for example, is a very fragile unit, where getting hit once is a bit terrifying for it. However, it can easily dance around foes with the right upgrades. Super robots, on the other hand, are made to take a beating and deal a lot more damage. Upgrade their armor and they will be able to tank hits even from bosses, with little issue, like the Grungust. This is why choosing your pilot for the right mech is even more important. Each character is meant for a different role. Back to skills again, some characters may have the ability called Potential. This skill is very important for super robot pilots, where the lower the HP of a unit gets, the stronger they will become, able to tank even more damage and strike back with a vengeance. There are some exceptions to the rules regarding these robots, since the Psybuster can be very mobile but also capable of doing a ton of damage as well. Just exercise proper judgment when learning how to use these characters, otherwise it will be very easy to get your unit killed. Morale works a bit differently too. Instead of 50, you have a max of 150, and start from 100. However, in addition to the rules from Masokai Shin, some characters have different ways to gain morale. For example, Violetta can actually gain 2 points for just dodging attacks. The game won't tell you the different values though, and I had to look it up on GameFAQs. The other important factor are ace bonuses. Since this is the early version of Super Robot Wars, getting 50 kills for a single unit will just give them a bonus of 5 to their morale at the beginning of a stage. Future games will usually give a bit more abilities like bonus attack power or something like that, but it's still a neat benefit to help gain access to certain moves and skills faster, especially when some will requirements are tough to get to or just annoying. For example, the Gaigen Skundo has a few useful attacks, but a majority of them require a decent amount of will, and without it, the mech has to be super close to an enemy or it'll just be a sitting duck. Parts can also be added, allowing you to either use consumable items to restore certain things like a character's energy or boosting certain stats. Like say if you have a unit that's more fragile, you can equip stuff boosting mobility so they become much more harder to hit, or added armor so they can tank damage a bit easier. Some parts even allow the mech to gain a bonus, like the Tesla drives, making them capable of flight so they can move around the map much easier. Though of course, all mechs have a limited amount they can equip. Battleships are also available to use and can store characters inside so they can recover, or just carrying them across a map just so you can race to the end of the stage and not have to worry about them. They are sadly not very good in combat. I'm sure with the right amount of grinding they can be amazing. They are certainly made to take a beating at least, but I mostly use them as shields for more fragile units or taking advantage of certain spirits. Plus if the ship goes down, it's an automatic game over. The one exception is the Kurogane, but that's mostly because Elzum is usually at the helm. Fuck it, I'm playing the clip for his music. I really love his music, guys. If I could marry an MP3 file, I totally would. Sad part is, it'd probably make more money than I would. Unlike with Masokai Shin, there are way less bosses that rely on the afterimage ability. I think only one did during the entire playthrough, and while recurring, she doesn't appear too often. Replacing this are barriers, which can reduce the amount of damage taken. Early on, these are actually balanced well with the bosses, as you need to force an enemy to deplete their energy supply. Even if your attack does nothing, it has the benefit of weakening their barriers and limiting their attack options, which then benefits your heavy hitters. Also, there are missiles called Energy Taker and Energy Drain. For the late game bosses, use them. For the love of all that is holy, use and abuse them. There are also many ways to mitigate and maximize damage in this game. One such way is through terrain. Beam weapons, unless you have certain equipment, are worthless in the water. Water in general helps to reduce damage, but your unit is also likely to perform less than ideal without the right upgrades. Remember the skill points I mentioned? You can use those to upgrade a character's specialty in 4 different areas, making them more suited to certain terrain. For example, by having an S-rank on ground type terrain, using gear for Gilliam's Gespense, it's incredibly harder for enemies to hit him so long as he remains on the ground. So if he goes into the air, which only has an A rank instead of an S, his performance becomes a bit sloppier. I should also note that characters only gain these points when they kill a foe, so if you don't give them attention, they will lag behind. Certain areas can be checked for bonuses, and it usually offers benefits like more defense, or more importantly, able to restore your HP and energy much faster. These can be lifesavers, or your greatest nemesis depending on the situation. Like say if you have a unit who burns through their energy very quickly, having them stay in attack from that panel will help them out a ton. But if say a boss is on there or a regular foe with high HP, Killing them just became a hell of a lot harder, especially if they just camp out there, and most likely will, though not every boss does this, preferring you come to them instead. Another thing introduced are team attacks. Unlike with the support moves, this requires units being close to each other, at least one space away, and even works diagonally. While there are sadly only 2 moves available, by upgrading certain weapons you can increase the damage output to outshine any other weapon in your arsenal. Plus, they can usually bypass defenses if used right and deal a ton of damage. However, you still need to require willpower to execute them, and by using the technique, it drains energy from all the mechs involved. So for something like with the Taisen, which relies primarily on weapons using ammunition, all of a sudden upgrading the energy output seems very important. And if you are on Ryusei's story route, his team attack may eventually seem useless due to the sheer power the SRX has. It's kinda why Rampage Spectre has become my go-to technique, and it really highlights the kind of relationship Kyosuke and Excellent have within the series. Transformations are also a thing, as some mechs can usually have an alternate mode where they are a plane or a tank. This usually changes their attack style entirely, and grants more mobility for the planes, less so for the tanks, and can help in traversing the map. Not necessarily ideal for bosses, but still a fun thing to toy around with. The overall difficulty I feel comes from not just how many skill points you collect, but based on the route you take. There are 2 paths you can take that I'll explain more in the story section. Certain characters may not be available for you to use, or you may even miss out on certain units. For example, with Ryusei, you gain the ability to combine the R-series robots into the mighty SRX, capable of some of the strongest attacks in the game. But in Kyosuke's route, you can only use it for a single stage. To make up for that, you do gain access to certain characters earlier who do have powerful units too. You even get to use them early on, though they will eventually have to leave for certain reasons and return much later. And the game knows how to slowly introduce new enemies so you can get used to what they do, at least in Ryusei's route, as well as not die in a single hit right away. It even kinda makes sense in the story, but I'll bring that up later. The worst episodes, though, I feel revolve around the missiles. See, they may not be strong, in fact they can only attack you from one panel over, but they will explode if they lose all their HP, resulting in an automatic game over. This is frustrating because if you have been focusing on upgrading attack power or if your units are simply too strong, they may destroy the missiles without even thinking, maybe get off a critical hit to make things worse. Now, there is a way to mitigate this annoyance, a spirit called Mercy. Even if a unit is overpowered, so long as the spirit is activated, the unit they would normally kill will be left with 10 HP. The downside is of all the units I tried to make stronger, only 2 had the skill. One of the newest incentives to not fail a stage and perform at your best are the skill points. Each stage will have a challenge under the mission objectives, sometimes not telling you right away, hinting that the mission may just be more chaotic than expected. These skill points are referred to as battle masteries here, and these determine the difficulty of the game. You can freely ignore these and the game will eventually be lowered to easy. Get enough though, and you will be locked into hard mode, which is where I stuck around. Difficulty is not the only change. With enough of these battle masteries obtained, and by fulfilling other conditions, you can gain bonus weapons and units. For example, by making the main character of your story have over 50 kills, and with 23 battle masteries, you can gain the Shishio Blade, a very powerful weapon that requires no willpower to use. It actually became one of my go-to weapons since its base attack was way higher than the TK knuckle move on the R1 machine, at least until it eventually got upgraded. These are also necessary to gain access to the bonus final stage, which is the hardest in the entire game. Granted, if you prepare well, it's actually fairly easy. Just make sure to get all your units into position and you'll be perfectly fine. And if you fail to get them on the stage by dying, in this game at least, repeating the stage doesn't erase it, making this game more beginner friendly. And if you are afraid of missing out on extra stuff, not every secret requires these. Some usually just need a character to be a certain level, or knocking a certain unit to a percentage of HP, or other requirements you can look up. Even in stages where you use new characters, you do have all the tools necessary to succeed. It's just a matter of using them effectively, like the first stage with Elzem, and forcing the enemy to move towards him since he lacks weapons. Overall, this game can be welcoming to new players of Super Robot Wars, and has a lot of potential to form your own dream team. When the story doesn't interrupt that at least. It's not perfect, but far from being bad, and I enjoyed myself a lot. Barring the missile missions anyway. And if you just want to skip the plot, it's entirely possible by holding down the shoulder and A button, but surely the story made everything worth it, right? Well, let's see the tale of these super robot pilots right now. Since this isn't a universe where stuff like Gundams and Mazingers don't exist, we do get a summary as to how the hell this series has well, a bunch of giant robots roaming about. 3 meteors crashed into Earth, with 2 heavily damaging New York and Russia, while a third called Meteor 3 hardly damaged the planet. It turned out to contain advanced technology. Without any massive damage to the planet, it's almost as if someone just threw the tech there on purpose. Regardless, the tech is referred to as Extra Over Technology, or EOT, and it's overseen by the EOTI, an institute dedicated to researching this stuff. One day, aliens show up, referred to as the Arrogators. The politicians of Earth try to smooth things over, but our resident bad boy, Shu Shirakawa, destroys any chance of peace, attacking the aliens and the Earth Federation army. And with that declaration of war, the founder of the EOTI, Bayan Zoldark, who you might remember as the father of Loon Zoldark from Maso Kaishin, forms both the Divine Crusaders as well as the United Colony Corps to oppose Earth in order to gain control of the situation and fight off the aliens. With both Earth and space serving as a battleground, the war split into 2 paths. You could choose between the rookie pilot Ryusei, a super robot fanatic who always wanted to pilot a robot and is forced into the situation after being scouted by someone who is totally not evil and doesn't remind me at all of a certain purple-haired bastard in... Or you can choose Kyosuke Nanbu, a pilot who is almost always serious and has trouble with luck. I often refer to him as Hiro Yui with a gambling problem. And unlike Ryusei, he might actually have hormones as he hooks up with Excellin, who is likely the biggest pervert in the Super Robot War series. Not counting spin-off or side games. Ryusei's story involves him being very passionate about a game called Burning PT, which lets you customize and fight with your own robot. The game, however, is actually a scouting tool to find capable pilots, and he gets the interest of Ingram and Aya's team, who believe he has the potential to be a part of the SRX team. This is due to Ryusei possessing telekinesis powers. Kinda, sorta. We rarely see this kind of ability used outside of a robot, but while inside, some units are able to draw forth power and manipulate their weapons to perform great feats, like forming an energy sword as one example. Basically, just... I don't know, think of Psylocke from the X-Men. That's the easiest way I can explain things. As you might expect, since Ryusei is a kid and acts like it, he is the inexperienced idiot who has to learn about the cruelty of war, as well as how to follow proper military protocol, lest he get everyone killed. He definitely helps create a lot of discord with his teammates, especially with Rai, the quiet soldier type who is easily irritated by Ryusei and seeks to take down his brother, blaming him for the death of his sister-in-law. And before you start to worry, he doesn't go full Sasuke. Thank God. There are a few comparisons to Maziki stories I can make regarding Ryusei, but the game doesn't spend too long exploring these issues. For instance, Ryusei never has a problem killing people. Well, not enough to mentally break down over it like Maziki did. So at times, it feels like a light version of Maziki's story, just with more red tape since Ryusei can't always do what he wants. Not that it really stops him, like, say, trying to pilot the R1 despite the fact that it may not work. And yet somehow it works because protagonist powers. One thing that did annoy me about him was mentioning how things felt cliche when meeting his team, and this is kinda where I have to pause the video to rant a bit. Just because you say things are cliche doesn't make your story good. If anything, you are highlighting why your story isn't really all that different, and the problems associated with it, and feeling like you're telling off other stories like this, some of which were featured in the Super Robot War series. I don't think this is brought up again in Game 2, and I certainly hope the series stops doing this. It annoyed me in Maso Kaishin, and it annoys me here. At any rate, Ryusei isn't a bad character. There are some interesting things done, and I like seeing a newbie just suddenly thrust into the military life, going way over his head. Plus he has a rivalry with Tenzin, who was recruited by the villains using the same method, by way of a video game. And it really demonstrates the kind of character Ryusei could have turned into had his training gone differently, since Tenzin just views this entire war as fun. Ryusei even states how he hates feeling similar to Tenzin, especially since piloting a giant robot was one of his lifelong dreams. Sadly, his own story is pretty predictable. One of the only things subverted was his relationship with Kasuha, since he lacks hormones, so she starts falling for another character instead. He loves robots so much that when he sees Loon's Valjean R, who has a human face, it's the one thing he ever calls cute in the entire series. Kyosuke, on the other hand, is more blunt and is much more used to being a soldier. He does, however, have some rather strange luck, as he tends to lose bets, but he's able to live through some situations he otherwise shouldn't have. This is demonstrated in the very first episode, during a test transformation with the Wild Rabbiter, where the machine explodes on him, yet he was able to get away with only minor injuries. Since he already has the experience, his story is about learning how to become a proper leader and working alongside a team that tends to clash with his attitude. Compared to Ryusei, he has a lot less development, but he's not shown to be inexperienced or too much of an idiot. This does at least allow for other characters to get some spotlight and grow. Arguably, Bull is the one who gets more potential growth since he's around Ryusei's age and is still mostly a rookie, thus left devastated when having to fight his former mentor/leader. Also, funny thing about Sangerzon, well, technically he did debut as a villain in Super Robot Wars Alpha Gaiden, only able to become a hero on the hard ending path. And as for Excellin, Well, let's just say we would be seeing a lot more interesting stuff had the characters not be limited to just portraits. Really, she's the ditz who really isn't an idiot due to her incredible talent in combat, mostly just trying to liven up the crew. And both stories have young captains, or in the case of Tetsuya, someone who will eventually be a captain, and they have to prove their abilities to their commanders. Lupina in particular, due to being very young, faces the pressure of wars early and lacks respect when some soldiers go and do their own thing, regardless of the circumstances. And also being hit on by a pervy president because politicians can't seem to... One moment, please. Oh, and thanks to the series, expect a lot more clips of those than usual. Thank God there's only one more game after this. And it may seem like I'm hard on Casanova here, but he openly volunteers to be bait to distract the UCC, so he is at least a decent person. On the positive side, we do at least get to know more about space, where colonies are very much a thing, even though we don't get too much time with them. I'm just so used to everything being on Earth in this series, I tended to forget about them in future games. Which is funny because one of the major plot points was a colony being gassed and killing many people in the past, explaining why certain characters are angry with each other at the mere idea of it, and also serving as another plot point in Game 2. Both routes have their own set of new characters and they do get some development, although others exist either to help convey info or just be comic relief, like Radha trying to get people to practice yoga. Fun fact, I had a gym class that taught yoga one day. I never wanted to hear about yoga ever again, so she kind of scares me. While some development feels good and justified, some of the development just feels a bit off. For example, Tasuku has a thing for Leona and is very interested in dating her, but it hardly goes anywhere and you never quite see why Leona will fall for him. And yet somehow in the end they do end up together. Or at least she agrees to cook for him even though he knows she's terrible at it. At best we get him having some self-doubt when he thinks he has a rival for her love. Oh, he mistakes for her brother. No worries there is no incest in this series, unlike with Masakai Shin. Which yes, according to the Wikia when I did some more research, Monica, aka Miss Hentai Face, is the half-sister of Shu Shirakawa.
You sick little monkey!
Never have I been more thankful that Shu doesn't seem the least bit interested in romance. Suddenly Miss moaning in the middle of a fight looks like a better option. That's not to say everything is bad though. I like the conversations between Daitetsu and Tetsuya, who I'll get more into in the second game, and I like Latuni's growth as reflected in her character portraits. Basically she was part of the school, something the Earth Federation Army once had to train child soldiers. Fortunately it was eventually shut down. Despite being taken in by a couple who love her very much, she is extremely shy around people and rarely focuses on anything outside of combat. This is even shown when her skills and gameplay simply outshine most other characters who are likely twice her age. Her working alongside Ryusei, and even bonding with a princess of another country, helped Latuni make a change to her personality, being more open and more prone to actually talking to people, as opposed to running away like she's Bernadetta from Fire Emblem Three Houses. The once shy character is even able to cheer up Ryusei when he is depressed regarding some spoilers. And most other development is done to help characters be expanded on with subsequent games. Latuni is an example again. The school would later get more attention as she tries to seek out her friends who are still under a stranglehold since its revival during the DC War. Another example is with Katina. Due to Lafina's inexperience with being a captain, and Katina generally being hot-headed, she often ignores her captain's orders and heads out on her own to fight, even if ill-advised or it gets her in trouble. This happens a few times, usually trying to prove herself as capable. In one stage, she becomes uncontrollable to me, so I had to constantly heal her up when she got into trouble, which was very annoying. Her subordinate, Russell, is often a coward and plays more of a support role, reflecting in his spirits as he can tank attacks or heal up allies. By the time Katina disregards orders and charges in solo yet again, needlessly risking her life, Russell actually gains the courage to smack some sense into her, trying to make sure she doesn't get herself killed. Surprisingly, this actually works since she doesn't try to kill him, recognizing his feelings and becoming easier to work with in the team. Though she still doesn't ease up on one certain character with his training, which is understandable since he ruined her chance to pilot a beefy new machine. That's also a recurring gag in this series. Any new mech she wants or has her eyes set on, she loses the chance. To this day, she is still stuck with the Gespens, and that's another reason why I love this game. The humor. There are many times Super Robot Wars gets a good chuckle out of me, even for the dumbest of jokes. Excelling is one big highlight with her brand of comedy, sometimes getting other people in trouble like with Mazigi and Loon and lightly insinuating they were busy doing the deed, despite them earlier facing off against delusions of certain characters. Or when she manages to trick Kyosuke into taking an SOS call to satisfy Bullet's desire to help people. Or there was that time Radha roped all the female characters into yoga, knocked them out, and they ended up appearing super late because of the exercise. I even like Violet's reaction, especially given the kind of character she is. Hell, for someone as serious as Sanger, even he gets some funny lines early on, which I feel is also done a bit better in the manga. Which, by the way, if you can't find the anime, try looking up the manga of the Super Robot Wars series. Kasuha, despite being a damsel in distress in this game, does provide some comedy too in the form of energy drinks. They are effective, but they knock your ass out for a while, as seen with Mazaki taking one and rendered unable to fight till he recovers. Even Ingram is nearly taken out by the beverage. Speaking of Mazaki, I thought I would have more to say about him. I sadly don't. His development really boils down to needing to put away his murder boner for Shu for the sake of the world, and his relationship with Lune is mostly the same, with her easily buying his fake flirting. Surprisingly, it was Excellent who pushed for Lune to pursue Mazaki, surprisingly able to determine that Mazaki was interested in someone older, aka Wendy. From what I remember, he doesn't do too much in Original Generations 2 beyond getting lost around the planet. Also, as far as canon material goes, Ryusei's route is canon, but technically so is Kyosuke's first half only. Still, I recommend going through the full Kyosuke route anyway, if only because, well, some moments are still pretty awesome. As you might expect, with characters having more development that's more built upon on the sequel as opposed to here, I'm going to save most of the discussions about them for Game 2. Kinda like what I did with the Digital Devil Saga video, although there are still some spoilers I want to discuss about Game 1. Overall, the story I've found mostly just alright, with some great moments sprinkled in. There's nothing I found overly bad in it, as there is enough downtime for characters to get their moments, especially with the story being split in two. The problem is that it may seem a bit bland to some people, not help with an antagonist with questionable motives when you really think about it. Some may also take issue with the majority of these villains lacking much to them, but that's kind of the thing with Super Robot Wars. A good majority of them are meant to be the punchable types we won't feel bad about killing. Most of the time anyway. Even the ones with legitimate reasons are so obsessed with vengeance, the game doesn't spend too much time on their deaths. But we gotta discuss spoilers for some of the big bads, so let's do that now. For this section, I want to focus mostly on the antagonists, especially since, well, most of them are dead and never coming back, and those that are returning, they mainly just wanted to test the gang's abilities before rejoining them to kick alien butt. Bion Zoldark is the first main antagonist of the game, and revealed to have orchestrated the war to overthrow the EOTI, which he himself founded, and prepare them for the true threat of the Arrogators. Throughout the game, many characters question the motives of the commander, either him or Mayor, as if he is purposely leading Earth Federation forces to him. This is made more apparent when Shu Shirakawa is more than capable of ending everyone due to the sheer power of the Grandson, and the lack of other really hard-hitting mechs actually being used against the gang. Shu is even willing to sit the final battle out if unprovoked, mostly observing the conflict at the request of Bion. In reality, Bion wanted to help advance this particular army, to help them get what they need in order to face the Arrogators. And if they died, well, he already had his own army with advanced machines and Shu Shirakawa. Plus he could get rid of certain people by conquering the world. I do admit I liked how the story was flowing with a plan like this, but there was a major problem I had with it. He recruits some of the most dangerous people, ones who either see war as a game, like Tenzin, or those who have a huge murder boner for the EFA for the loss of his family, like Tempest. Hell, Adler used to be part of the school and is giddy as all hell to take over the world, even subjecting pilots to mental torture to control the Valjean. It basically felt like he kept too many people out of the loop, which in turn would cause needless chaos, some of which I felt could have been avoided. Well, with some characters anyway. Now some are kept up in the loop, like Elzem and Sanger, who are on the side of the DC to take down any traitors to the true goal. The traitors just end up trying to take over the world anyway and wasting resources and time, all of which could have been used against the Arrogators. Then again, it could be an easy way to highlight those particular people right away, so that way you know when to take them down as soon as possible, as opposed to hiding and just waiting for them to show up in the next game. Although there are still consequences as seen in Game 2. But hey, at least this plan did prevent the EOTI from selling out the Earth for more technology. Well, it's good to know in this universe the Republicans have taken over. Just play the clip. I wish I could say more about Meyer v. Brandstein, the father of Elzem, Leona, and Rai, but sadly he doesn't even really do all that much. One thing I'll grant these two antagonists, they die with dignity, and without the assumption that they were just going to miraculously live all this. There is also more evidence as to why Earth needs stronger forces beyond just the rebellion. There are many times the antagonist could just kill them all without batting much of an eye. It's only now some powerful units were being produced, like the Taisen. The R series of robots are not even complete until the DC is taken care of, and the R1 had to be forced to completion when they were desperate. Almost all the villains are banking on the characters getting stronger, including the Arrogators, all while leaving some chances of victory. And during the war with the UCC, since they did have supporters in space, they tried to limit involvement with civilians. One certain asshole does eventually try to use poison gas and other such underhanded tactics, though is foiled by not just the ATX team, but by Sanger himself. Which makes sense since Sanger is willing to die if it means the ATX team can get stronger, or even kill them if they are too weak, but he isn't willing to pointlessly kill other people to do so. Elzum is kind of the same way, though we don't see too many scenes of him upholding the same kind of code Sanger has. Considering his ungodly skill though, it would have been far too easy to shoot down some of the heroes. Even Mazagi with his Psybuster actually has trouble with him. Then you have the traitor, blue-haired Shu Shirakawa, Ingram. Yes, though honestly, I feel both he and Shu share a lot of similarities beyond the fact that they smirk so damn smugly. In fact, they basically have the same goal in mind. It's just Ingram's story in terms of the OG series is much shorter since he dies at the end of the game and never gets a chance to come back. Ingram was in charge of creating the SRX team and using some people for experiments regarding the T-Link system. One of them was a woman he manipulates with love, Aya, and the other was Ryusei's mother, which was why he wanted Ryusei himself, assuming he would be a much better candidate to pilot the R1. But after the DC was defeated and the R-series robots finally get their upgrades, he turns on the group, shooting down yet not killing Aya, and brainwashing Kasuya into fighting her allies. Yet because of his actions, like helping the team fully form the SRX through battle and not killing Aya, there were some doubts to his motives. This could also confuse the player when Violetta works with him, yet never attacks the team, mostly focusing on stuff like killing the EOTI Council, who plan to sell out the Earth yet again, and excuse me 1 minute.
Don't do this, bro!
But her actions throughout the game, despite the fact that she is killing people, are helping the heroes because it's those same people who keep holding them back from doing what must be done. Plus, given the goal of the Arrogators, it's likely those politicians would have been killed anyway. In reality, much like how Shu Shirakawa was being controlled by Volcrus, Ingram was trying to resist the control of a machine called Judeka, which has already claimed several people under its thrall, making them think they are part of an alien race, when they aren't. The Balmerians, which is the aliens, seem to not exist, with so many machines controlled by an AI. Anyone who claims they are a Balmerian, and being dressed in a really weird way, they're just humans on Earth that were just taken due to their potential. For example, Tenzin is taken due to his high skill, or they'll take other people like those possessing strong TK power, like with Aya's sister. Ingram is kinda no different in that regard, and it really shows how even the main threat was just building everyone up to use his puppets. Much like Shu, he has a certain degree of freedom, but the only way he can get true freedom will come with his death. Violetta tells Gilliam at the end of the game she was a clone of Ingram, made when the control briefly held no effect. The truth was, much like Bayan and Shu, although he has more selfish reasons, he was preparing the gang for the threat of the Arrogators and to save the Earth, even if his freedom was brief and even if he wasn't around to enjoy it. Unlike our resident Smuglord though, Ingram doesn't come back from this, though elements of what he did do have ripples throughout the series, like with what he has done to Aya's sister. Even in Moondwellers, from what I saw online anyway, someone who looked like Violetta appeared as an enemy apparently, and a few games beforehand showed the real being controlling Ingram. And to be fair, Gilliam does suspect there were a few loose ends to this whole mess. While I don't feel Ingram has much of a character, or at least being able to see his true personality, I did love how he acted around the team. It was a bit less smugness with him, and more about making his former teammates have no reason to hold back, and to constantly improve themselves. For the SRX team, it was easy in betraying someone who fell in love with him, and people who saw him as a mentor. Ryusei being hot-headed and Rai able to be blinded by his rage made this far easier. For the ATX team, that too was simple. I'm sure he wanted to torment Ryusei more with Kasua's mind control, but this also affected Bulla as a result, who fell in love with her, so that was a nice added touch. One thing that showed he cared, or at least wanted to make sure the team kept getting stronger, was to order Violetta to keep training Ryusei after his death. Though based on what I read about Ingram in the Wikias, apparently his character in other timelines held powers over or dealing with time, and the real villain mainly saw all the timelines, and maybe that has something to do with it? I don't know, and I don't think this game knows either. I mainly wanted to bring that up because in the game he first appeared in, Kasuha was a possible romantic interest. Yeah, makes this scene a hell of a lot creepier, doesn't it? Also, another way he was able to piss off Kyosuke in his own route, he took Excellin and did the same thing with Kasuha. Despite the fact that Kyosuke doesn't really show romantic feelings for Excellin, at least not openly since they do become a couple, his reaction is priceless. Yeah, Kyosuke managed to use all his spirits, even ones he doesn't have access to, and is taking point in front of Ingram's entire army, and he is fully prepared to murder them all. I love it when games like this incorporate gameplay elements to the story, it's freaking great. The story overall feels mostly like build-up, setting up everyone for more threats coming into the future. Original Generations 2 in particular is going to hit the gang pretty damn hard. Let's just say while Ingram was extreme in his methods to make the gang strong, it was kinda needed in more ways than one. Also, it feels like build-up for the player, as Original Generations 1 is kinda easy to get into for someone who never touched a Super Robot Wars game, and to prepare you for the big difficulty spike the other games will have. Especially Game 2. You can definitely see it with new weapons and characters being introduced over time. Even with the aliens, they don't go all out to test the humans, and then eventually start to slowly bring up their more powerful units as the conflict is heightened, since they want to collect the pilots as samples to convert into their brainwashed army. And this works for the DC as well, given what their goal was. If you were able to get into the current generation of Super Robot War games like V and X, you might be able to adjust to the likes of this one fairly easily. Give it a try, and hopefully one day, we can get a collection of all the OG games in English. A man can dream, damn it. Next time though, we truly begin Super Robot Wars with the game many fans love, with Super Robot Taisen, Original Generations 2. Bring some tissues and popcorn, because this game is going to take you for a ride. I'm the smartest moron, and thank you for watching.